Hi, colleagues, and welcome to another episode of Dincast, where today we're going to be exploring how you innovate in a crisis. And I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Koen Cass, founder of Health Scout, a healthcare futurist, and one of the best speakers I've had the pleasure of working with over the last few years. And I think you're going to really enjoy not just what he's going to share with us, but also how he's been able to do that in a very, very short space of time. A good personal story here as well. So, Koen, would you mind sort of just introducing yourself to our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, welcome to our kind of green screen stage. I'm going to show you how it looks in a second. Introducing myself briefly, I have one dream. And my dream is to build a world in which our grandchildren no longer will get sick, which sounds quite contradictory to kind of the situation we're in right now. And nevertheless, what I would like to convey to you is that what is currently happening is one of the best gifts I could even imagine from getting, in a sense. Because what I normally do, I travel half of the world to explain people why every single company on the planet at some time will become a health and a learning company. And I think what we encounter now is speeding that up. And that's where I think a lot of things, learnings will come from, independent from the domain you're in, the work you do. So what we had to do, because half of my time I was traveling the world to run workshops and to do kind of sessions on stages. When we first started to hear about what was happening in Wuhan, we anticipated that this could happen. And we said, what if we kind of make sure that we survive? How can we kill our business? And that's a really exciting learning. The best people, the best innovators, they dare to ask how and what could kind of wipe out their business and what they could do to kind of anticipate that. And I'm going to try to show that, if that's fine with you. For sure, I don't hope it looks like this at this point in time at your site. Huh? This is how it looks at my site. I'm standing in front of a green screen, and basically the kind of the real life feeling you have, me standing in front of you, kills the feeling of being in a quarantine. I can walk around and I can basically engage with you. Ian, up to you. Do you want to ask me questions, or do you want me to tell me a few things? Up to you.
Well, I'm just really interested how quickly you anticipated and then were able to change the way that you run business. So could you just walk us through how you managed to change so quickly and innovate?
Yeah. The thing is, we just used a simple rule. There's a number of simple rules in life, and Darwin gave one. He never said it's survival of the fittest. It's survival of the most adaptable. And that's what we did. We said, well, if the stage is not longer there, let's bring the stage to us. And to show you how fast adaptation can happen, there is a number of remarkable things happening. This is Venice currently. This is Venice 2020, 15th of April. The channels in Venice are completely clean. You see dolphins in the channels. And basically, to answer your question, what we did is basically take learnings from the last 5 years, where I have been having the honor to talk with, I think, roughly 60 management teams, companies worldwide. And 2 of these companies were completely different from all the rest. They were run by a CEO who was the founder of the company, 65, 70 plus, had no smartphone when I met him, but asked himself, how would moving into digital make my company obsolete? And how do I anticipate that? If I think about the 58 other guys, they didn't see kind of a burning platform. They said, well, we'll see what we do. We evolve slowly and we adapt to needs we see. If you dare to say, well, I start from an empty page from scratch, it makes your life 10,000 times easier, really. So don't think about small incremental changes. Think about how can you use a white page. This is pretty confronting, but I went to a funeral last week. I mean, it was a digital funeral. Did you ever envision that a funeral would be in a digital fashion? And sure, it's not the same, fully realize that. But the fact that these kind of services even turn into digital formats tells you that at least that concept that everything can be digitized starts to take ground, one. But second, and way more important, why we always kind of explain that moving digital is going to change healthcare from sick care into really healthcare, we always use one example. And that example is the biggest innovation ever. To me, the biggest innovation ever is soap. Soap managed to extend our lifespan with 100% in the last 200 years and basically managed to deal with infectious diseases. It's kind of fascinating to see that the best drug we currently have against corona is soap, again. So what I do for a living is ask myself, how can I digitize soap? How can I use the concept of soap to deal with the major reasons why we die, which is chronic diseases? And so what we encountered the last few weeks, I think I can project on a number of things I'm going to show, and I think are applicable to every single business from now on. One example is this. I think when the crisis started to become visible in this country, in my country, in Belgium, in 2 weeks' time, a maker team was kind of maturing, was developing by itself. So a community of people, builders, who can make things, which used digital tools like a Slack channel to come together and ask themselves, what can we do as makers, coming from the creative business, coming from the maker business, coming from whatever kind of domain, what can we do to anticipate if things go worse, to make things and to build things. So we use digital to bring people together, share ideas super fast. And with Foxconn in the US, Foxconn in China, Foxconn are the guys who make the smartphones for Apple and for Samsung. When they announced that they were switching a number of production lines to make masks, mouth masks, one of the first things we did as well as a maker community, we decided to start showing people how to make masks. And one of the first things we kind of put online was a website. I apologize, it's in Dutch, but it's a website which is now used in the entire country, where we downloaded the way how everybody can sew and make masks himself or herself, where to get the supplies, how to do it. Yeah, and I think that's not about being visionary. That's just about making sure that you get resources ready by the time that you see things from changing. And I hope that that is a first learning, that people start to see that instead of saying, well, we'll see what we do, that this crisis gives people kind of a sense of urgency, that they can ask themselves, what if my business would be a burning platform? What if my business would be wiped out in 30 days? What can I do now in advance to live through that? By the way, this was a bridge built by Japanese engineers in Honduras. By the time the bridge was ready, the river was floating differently. Not good. That's something you want to avoid. And when I show this slide, people always laugh. Now I can show curves from, well, corona curves, and people start to get what sense of urgency really means, right? Now, to give you a few examples of how to deal with that. Well, this is, of course, extreme. This was at the construction site of the Wuhan hospital, which has been built in 10 days. That's different from what you do in the UK by reinstalling big kind of stadia, or what Madison Garden did in New York. There was already a building. Here in China, there was no building. It was built in a few days. Sure, that's extreme, but let me give you a few other examples. This is a bookstore. And this bookstore launched an ebook for kids explaining what a virus is, what corona means. And they made that for free. You can download that book. Since they did that, I mean, everybody knows the bookstore. They were fast enough to anticipate that there might be a need to explain something simple. This is a design store which makes furniture for offices. They launched a cardboard office. Well, an office which you can buy online, and in 50 seconds, you have a cardboard, well, office up and running. I mean, they're top of mind now as a design shop. You see, it's kind of taking a sense of urgency, doing something with it. This comes from a 3D printing lab in Belgium, Materialize, which 3D printed and made the protocols open to make a handle to put on your door so that you don't have to kind of touch the handle of your door. These are super simple examples of how you can start to make products you never ever anticipated to make. And of course, you have seen this, the big kind of perfume companies which started to use a number of their lines to make sanitizers. And that's kind of the obvious thing. What might be less obvious, that using digital, you can start to make completely novel platforms. This is a really cool one. This is a platform, it's like Airbnb or Uber, where you can find all the festivals currently ongoing on a distance. So if you're an organizer, make sure that you put yourself on that festival, because people find you in a way they didn't find you before. They didn't realize you were still online, right? Do I still make myself clear?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah? Okay. And then also very nice thing that I think people will start to learn how to deal with data. We're not trained to deal with data. We just kind of watch things and we make up our mind, not looking into depth most of the times what the data really tells. Look to this slide. It's a fascinating one. This could be kind of at the fat duck in the UK, you get kind of a tomato, but it tastes like a mandarin, or vice versa. So I think the crisis will start to teach people how to deal with data. This is a cool one. This is Glimpse. And Glimpse shows you, based on retailer data they find from social media, what is currently being sold more than in the past. And it's not just toilet paper. It's not just VR glasses. It's also sewing kits. So it's by looking to basically what people buy online, they build a platform for companies to see where products they make might fit into this crisis. And a number of things are really kind of even so surprising that you say, oh, wow, I even didn't think that this is now soaring because of the crisis, right? So try to make sure that you can capture data which teach you how you reinvent yourself, basically using what happens in the real world. And one of the things I also think is going to happen is the fact that people will become better in visualizing things. As an entrepreneur, as an innovator, if you have a new idea, you have very often the kind of, the first reflex, I will detail all the things very thoroughly what I'm going to do. But I think the last few weeks, we have seen how one single visual tells it all, right? This comes from the Beatles cover. You've seen that. This was, I think, a super nice way to explain social distancing. Right? The four guys crossing the street, basically spreading themselves. Look to these guys. It's fascinating. You recognize them, but it explains, well, the message they wanted to convey. So I think what we're going to see, that people will start to make use of different ways to visualize concepts and to visualize ways of products, services they're developing, using the fact that they're now confined in ways to communicate. You can start to think about, how can I do things in a different visual fashion, just like I'm doing here in front of this green screen as well. And that brings me to a next point. Are there examples where people really can prove that it's an advantage being confronted with such a crisis? In my country, we didn't have a Babylon yet, and it was a very hard sell to get telehealth being sold. The crisis basically wiped out every obstruction against teleconsultation. So we see a lot of kind of things which were hampered because of few things, which now get a chance to be spearheaded. And where people don't ask, well, what's the return of investment? The urgency to do it is so large that it goes faster. And that brings me to, I guess, the point you wanted to discuss really. That is, how do you kind of deal with a crisis like that? And I think a very nice example of what is now happening is exactly what I also used to use in the past, showing people how to think from a white page. If you look to the slide in the back of me, you might argue that this is scary. It's a blue ocean, which I guess that's a shark. But I think you agree with me, Ian, that this is more scary. You don't know what's coming. The unknown, that is what people are scared about. What is coming tomorrow? What is coming the day after? And believe me, it's not over yet, right? But what we did, and that is the crux of delight thinking, that is the crux of starting from an empty page and reinvent yourself, is we asked ourselves, how can we use this to the better? And I'm going to show you that with a super simple graph, this one. This is my birthday wish list, if you like. And if I have a package on my wish list, on my bucket list, and you get me a present which I kind of hope to get, I'm super happy. But if you give me something I even didn't expect to get, I'm super happy. I'm delighted, right? And that is why dealing with an unknown allows you to start rethinking what you mean for your business, where you can start to ask, how can I give something to my customer? He didn't expect me to give. He didn't expect from me, which brings him back to me because it's overwhelming his experience. And that experience, the ultimate fashion of that, is called delight. And the fascinating thing is that when we published a book on that, was last year, we kind of made a roadmap on how people can start to use delight thinking. Reduce friction, reverse perspective, think the impossible, think the reverse. And actually what is now happening, I can use the Corona crisis to use for each of the 15 shades of delight thinking to give people examples from their business, whether they're in construction, in housing, in whatever business, take them with the hand, show them what has happened in the world somewhere, and to show how that can help them to reinvent themselves and to progress. And to end, maybe a few more things just to make sure that people see how that fits in a brain. The majority of people are trained to be best in class in what they do. If you look to these guys in the prison, I mean, if you ask me, well, make me a painting of what you see, that is what the majority of people do. But you want to be this guy. This guy is blind. He sees what is beyond, and he makes a much nicer painting than what the other guy did before him, right? So it's a mindset of seeing opportunities change. And I think for your readers or for your audience, that the concept of how will you delight someone tomorrow, starting by thinking, how can I disrupt my business? Not using disruption as a tool to, well, I have to, but as a way to create an unknown experience, that is a fascinating way to go forward. And let me give you a few examples. One of the businesses really hit hard is kind of restaurants and bars and cafes, right? But look to this. This is a place which is selling the wine which is currently not sold at restaurants. That's a fascinating way to get access to something I never had access to, because I had to go to a restaurant to get their wine. Now their wine is kind of open source, if you like, right? So it's kind of rethinking how a digital tool can make your business kind of look different for a while. And the same holds true with this. This was an example of the first hospital on the planet, it's in St. Louis, which at the inside doesn't contain any beds and any patients. the Corona crisis is helping us big time to get that idea across. We don't need patients in the hospital. We can get patients remote, really, at home, and monitor them themselves. And then we got questions from people, well, yeah, but we have labs, we do research in our company. How can that work? And these are examples of companies which help you to create a lab in virtual fashion and combine digital and analog tools to start experimenting in a virtual fashion into your real lab in your company, right? And this way, we believe that showing examples from how people adapted, that will really inspire and motivate people to start thinking, well, we can also start from a white page without kind of having to reinvent the wheel in a sense. We can do what others have done before us. We copy and paste, adapt it to ourselves. And that brings me to the last point I want to make. What I see happening in my surroundings is also something worrisome in a sense. There seems to be some momentum for people saying, well, if things go back to normal, and that's how they pronounce it, what do we do if we go back to normal? And they don't use, it will be a new normal. What do we do if we go back to normal? And I see that the powers of organizations which say, well, when it stops this crisis, then we will do it back like the way we did it, that is kind of might happen in a number of conditions. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning, maybe it should even get worse to really change that mindset. And people say, well, let's basically kill a number of these old assumptions. And one of these old assumptions really has to do with privacy, with privacy. Can we start to share data like Singapore did really early on, knowing who I am, sharing that with someone else to avoid that I'm meeting a infected guy? That is something where, at least in my part of the world, we still struggle with on how to implement that on a daily basis. But there is hope, and that's where I'm going to stop. Yeah? A few days ago, I published something online on something which is being tested by Etihad Airways in Middle East. They're playing with kiosks, so you see them here. The first kiosks, which they're going to implement at airports, which when I'm going to travel, they first scan whether I'm healthy, no fever, no extended heart rate, and so on and so on. So when I post this, the first reaction which I got, not in public, but in private, and I can tell, came from a movie theater. One of the biggest movie theaters on the planet is a Belgian company. It's called Kinepolis. And they anticipated that they also had to go to a new normal. And seeing this kind of development of a health kind of device, which can measure the health of people, they are now anticipating, or they might anticipate how that could be used at the ticketing office in a movie theater of the future. And this way, I believe that this crisis is really going to turn the mindset of people towards what can we do towards our customer to become a health company. Because we see that that is one of the biggest gifts we have, that is remaining and being healthy. And so if I have to summarize and give you one advice, or if you read us one advice, is the following. I think that from my side, it makes my life easier to show how the learnings from the crisis help me to explain and help me to show people how we now can also fight the biggest crisis we have, which is dying from chronic diseases, right? And so the fact that we learn fast in managing an acute disease, I think we're going to apply in the rest of the world, in the rest of our healthcare and educational system as well. And for that reason, I would like to send your people home with one question. The world looks different now, right? Different from 3 months ago. But try to ask yourself now, well, what can you see clearly today? I'm going to walk out for a second. That you couldn't see 3 months ago. Because The adaptation you had to make now, or maybe didn't make, believe me, you might have to make that again. So you've learned now from others doing it, I think, on a wide, well, with a kind of a way on a description and a roadmap on how to do it, you can start to apply it for yourself. If you ask yourself, how will my company become a delight company, independent of the product service you sell? How do you make delight using unknowns as an asset to recreate? And that's, I think, the biggest learning of the entire crisis. That yes, it learns that being creative, not that hard, that stealing ideas from others is the way to do it, but that the mindset of seeing the urgency to say, well, let's start from that white page is now widely opened and for you to grasp.
Thank you so much, Koen. I mean, what an inspirational presentation there. And I think everybody's going to be running now to look at their own version of the green screen. That worked superbly well, sir. So thank you very much for that. Just a couple of quick questions from me, really, just to get your views on this. Obviously, there is a cost, a financial cost to the crisis that we're actually going through. And in previous crisis, obviously not at this scale, the initial reaction has been, well, let's close down non-essential services, of which sort of R&D and innovation is one of those sort of services. Are you arguing that actually probably this might be the time when you actually up or increase your investment, not just in cash terms, but in people terms, in looking at the innovation potential?
Absolutely, no brainer. Absolutely. And the fun thing is that it makes an easier sell. Because very often the question comes from, what's the return on investment from that new innovation? And I think that the proof you have to bring will be lower, because the fact that you have to adapt to survive, first question people might ask, well, what is it going to bring us money-wise? That people will start asking a different question. What does it make that we still exist the day after tomorrow? And you might recall that story from Google. Google is 21 years old now, I think. When the company is 1 year old, the two founders wanted to sell the company to Yahoo. Yeah, Yahoo was the biggest kind of portal on the planet at that point in time. And they wanted to sell the company for $1 million. And the board of Yahoo said, well, not interested, because the website which finds websites, well, that's not gonna scale. Who is stupid in the story? Well, you might argue the guys from Yahoo. Well, if the guys from Google didn't manage to see the value of what they built 21 years ago, then I think, with all respect, you might have a hard time to see that value for yourself. So kill that idea of return on investment. Use your innovation department to make new things, really make new things and build.
And one final question from me is, obviously, you know, people will be worried. In the UK, companies have furloughed a lot of staff. They've taken out because, as I said, they don't know what's going to happen and things like that. You've talked a lot about the use of technology and about the way we've got to rethink things. Could you sort of leave us with where you think some of the new emerging job roles will be that perhaps we're not aware of now, or in the next year or two, actually people are going to require, you know, more people working in the data industry, for example?
Yeah, I think that one of the things we're gonna see is that people might rethink where they source things from. So it might be that there comes a first reflection that regions, countries, bigger regions have to construct things for themselves. That's an option. And that you see more things which will be built just to make supplies as a kind of guarantee to have them. Two, I really think that we're going to see to what care brings to people, that the value of care providers has kind of redefined. You might have seen that famous quote from this guy in Spain who said Ronaldo and Messi are being paid X amount of dollars. Well, does that help us to solve the crisis, knowing that the care providers are only being paid well? So I think we're going to rethink the job of care providers. And I think we're going to see a huge extension of what care provision will be. And I think we're going to see a huge amount of things like coaches, human beings, not machines, human beings which make use of technology, which will come into your life and will become people we can relate to, we can talk to, people we can compare to, and I think we're going to make a world which at the end will become way more social, because we see that one of the biggest threats coming to us is sure that virus, but that being isolated and that being alone for so long, I mean, not healthy. And we had already a crisis of loneliness coming to us, which was mainly hitting the very young people. But so I think that new jobs will come from the domain of rethinking how building communities and human connection might strive and might get better.
Okay, thanks so much, Koen. I mean, I could talk to you all day, but we've sort of reached our time for this chat.
Sure, sure.
That was superb. I'm sure my members will get a huge amount out of that. Thanks so much for sharing it. And as I say, I'm off to sort of price up a green screen for across here in the UK as well. So thank you very
All
much,
right.
sir.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Bye bye.